Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Sam Gabriel here, and welcome to What If Deku Could Manipulate Gravity, Part 7. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, so we begin. They say life flashes through your eyes in the moments before death. It was a phenomenon that always seemed to occur along with the sense of time slowing down. Izuku Midoriya had watched the concentrated light build up from that single point on his rival's hand, and there was nothing he could do about it. He couldn't move, he couldn't dodge. His mind spun and thoughts poured in as the bright beam headed toward him. What was he thinking about? To answer that question, he was simply blank. Instead, the child just grinned with excitement and held out his hands. He was more than ready for the challenge. The complicated well of gravity intensified between the two palms of his freckled hands, and despite only perfecting it on the spot moments ago, there was no way he could just pass by the opportunity to test it out. The kid spontaneously yelled out the first thing that came to his mind. Full counter! The blast that was supposed to strike Izuku right in the chest hit the space between the child's hands. The crowd watched with bated breath. A deep orange hue engulfed the boy, and within a second, the AP shot was thrown right at Bakugo. The blonde let out another huge explosion from his palm and swerved to the side, narrowly dodging his own attack. What was that? Was this what they worked on? They're just not holding back! When it came to the two boys who had been raised together, holding back was just not a choice. Despite being originally opposites, they had grown to imitate the other in order to constantly push their own limits. It was why they seemed to constantly be neck and neck. The moment either one of them pushed even the tiniest bit ahead, the other would fight with twice the fervor to get even further. Boundaries just didn't exist between the two, and now they stared each other down with exhilarated grins. They clashed equally, causing both boys to be out of breath. The temperatures were gradually rising as a side effect of Bakugo's explosions. The heat only intensified as sweat clung to him. The blonde was a natural enemy of Izuku, but the opposite could be said back, as the brunette was a highly adaptable person with a versatile quirk. This was only boosted by the child's quick wits, vast knowledge of quirks, and almost terrifying ability to just pinpoint weaknesses. They're evenly matched! What's gonna happen now? With true rival fashion, the two just stood there for a second to stare each other down. Not a single movement was made. They just took the moment to appreciate the fight and waited for the time to strike. Crash! Whoa! Mike screamed as the two simultaneously jumped forward. Their hands aggressively collided as Izuku's gravity-light fist was locked in a stalemate. It had been held still by Bakugo's sparking palm, and there was another instantaneous moment where silence rained down when the ground beneath the two started to crack. A cloud of dust was pushed aside by their sheer brute force when an explosive right hook from Bakugo was aimed for the head. The freckled one immediately backed up, dodging the vicious detonation by a hair, and forced distance between the two before rushing back in with his fists crashing down like ruthless weights. Another violent discharge was thrown out, but Bakugo faltered at the last second. Izuku swiftly dodged the wild eruption before redirecting his attack harshly back onto the blonde. The rough rumble fiercely continued as the hot-headed pair wildly exchanged their furious explosive clashes in a frenzied volley. It didn't matter where they were on the stage, the two were locked in a hot-tempered struggle. On the ground, mighty blasts boomed across the stage in vigorous crashes as the sparks were caught in a persistent loop. Clapping out from Bakugo's sweaty palms, they were either dodged or redirected, only to be dodged again. The discharge shook the air itself as it trembled from the powerful exchange. Every so often, the fight was dragged into the air as Bakugo slammed into the greenette like a destructive missile. The freckled one retaliated by mercilessly dropping the blonde toward the ground, pushing his limits to do so. Another eruption would follow as the stage was reduced to rubble, the human bomb thunderously throwing himself back up as a result. The platform had been completely wrecked with broken cement, dust, and smoke, only to be charred as more destructive detonations crashed around. The heat had pushed Izuku to his limit, and Bakugo's sweat was starting to ignite all over his body. Every time he let out an explosion, his arms would painfully creak. Both boys looked ready to faint as the blonde held his strongest position once more. Izuku slammed his hands together as the air heavily distorted around them. AP counter! The destructive beam of firepower shot from Bakugo's hand. He was brought to his knees. Izuku caught the attack and it swerved wildly, still slightly blowing up on the boy before deflecting upward. The blast exploded like a firework for the crowd to see. Forced onto the ground, the Greenette's world was spinning as he couldn't feel his limbs. The heat was making him pant heavily. All he could feel was his throat burning. Silence reigned from above them all as the dust finally settled, revealing the two. Neither could move anymore, and they just stared each other down. Both boys were on their knees. The smiles on their faces were both weary and satisfied. It had been a good fight. The only way to determine the winner now was to see who fainted first, and unfortunately for one, the dehydration was what cost him the match. Fluffy green hair touched the ground. Izuku Midoriya has passed out. Katsuki Bakugo is the winner. The blondes didn't even hear Midnight as he fell to the floor, only seconds later. The sight of his rival falling had caused the adrenaline rush to crash as he blacked out too. Just like that, the fight was over. I don't know what to say. Did you see that, folks? Wow, that was intense. What a fight! What a fight! That was amazing. They were in an even match all the way until the end. Who would have guessed our final battle would be so mind-blowing? With President Mike excitedly screaming, stretchers were quickly brought on stage. They were both covered in burns and patches that would become bruises with time, but they were the scars of a well-fought match. Both boys were given to Recovery Girl, but since they had passed out from exhaustion, the school doctor could only do so much. In the end, she simply placed cold patches on their bodies before wrapping their limbs with bandages and burn cream. The crowd were given their break as the stage was repaired. The day was almost over, and the students were left talking to themselves. That was amazing! Uh-huh. I know, right? So cool, so manly. They were like, bam! Oh, and the crashes! Midoriya just tossing that... What was that thing he called again? Which one? You know, Pum one. AP shot. Yeah, AP shot. That was super cool, you know? It was like a whole laser beam. And then Mito Babe just threw it back. Yeah, man, it was so cool. As the loud friend group happily chatted, a conversation with the opposite atmosphere occurred as Ida ran from the stadium with Uraraka close behind. They were rushing to a hospital as the engine boy gripped his phone. The brunette was running with their now weightless bags as she called out her friend's name, albeit in vain. The look on Ida's face was a painful one as the boy crashed into the room. Tensei! Are you two awake? Recovery Girl walked into her room and was greeted with the sound of chatter. Damn, that was good! We need to go again in a colder place. It was Bakugo talking. The day had been pleasantly warm, which actually gave the blonde a slight advantage. If the day had been any colder, the scales could have been tipped to a different outcome. It didn't mean Bakugo's win was fake. His strength was the real deal. But small details like this only caused the two to itch for another fight, which was why they were already planning for their next one. Hell yeah, we do! Do you think Todoroki would make us an ice stage? With how you beat him up earlier, you'll need a lot of convincing, Planetoid. Okay, look, he was annoying me. I just destroyed him, and now you're asking for requests? Violent and demanding now, aren't we? Says you, dipshit. Take that back, dumbass. Get up, you two. I need to check your arms. Recovery Girl chuckled as she interrupted their argument. The two immediately stood up and let her kiss them better before applying new bandages. They were troublesome, but did listen when asked to. Problematic, but good children. The two headed down the corridor together as they could hear the sound of cheering. It was time for medals. You won fair and square, Kanchan. I'm taking second with pride. Bakugo turned to his lifelong rival who smirked. For now. Heh, good. That comment was the last thing they said as the two walked onto the stage. The cheers of the crowd were already deafening and only seemed to amplify as they hopped up to their podiums. All Might jumped dramatically from the roof of the stadium as Midnight handed over the medals. Izuku watched Tokoyami and Shoji take their third-place prize. They both received words of encouragement from the number one, and they thanked him for the praise. Now it was the Greenette's turn. Young Midoriya, that was an amazing fight, and a very close battle for first. I am very proud of you. You have improved so much since I first saw you and young Bakugo. Keep up the good work. The silver medal was placed around his neck, and the child received a hug from his favorite hero. As usual, the words were taken to heart, although this time it was a little sad. This means I need to work even harder to keep up with Kacchan now, right? Are things going to change? Since he's going to be his successor and all. All Might was praising Bakugo, who had a happy glow in his ruby-red eyes. He had won and couldn't wait to see what the future had in store for him. The sight made the Greenette smile as he internally shook his head. No, Kacchan isn't going to be any different just because he's a successor. I don't need to do anything differently. I've been pushing myself to the limits every day. I can just keep going. The nagging feeling didn't leave, as All Might displayed the gold medal for all to see. I can just keep running forward next to Katchan as I always do. Congratulations for keeping your promise from the opening ceremony. This was well deserved. Right? The cheers from the crowd went wild as everything came to an end. Thanks for your hard work. The 2 following days that were meant for rest were rather eventful as the dorms had been made. Students started to move in, and although it was smooth sailing for many, Ida and Uraraka were a little delayed, as they had a few personal problems to sort out first. Izuku was a little worried for his classmates' well-being, but in the end, decided that it was none of his business. Code names. You'll be coming up with hero names. It's something normal. But the news wasn't over as the homeroom teacher clicked on a remote. A projection appeared on screen as the kids saw offers for internships. Izuku 3194, Bakugo 2882, Tokoyami 1743, Todoroki 1583, Shoji 857, etc. The offers were spread across the top half as there was quite a dip near the end. The numbers there were single digits, but many were glad to even get offers. Hold on, Midoriya first and Bakugo second? It's the opposite of their placements at the sports festival. It's probably because Midoriya's nicer to the crowd. True. Momo sighed and turns to congratulate Todoroki. Unfriendly as ever while shaking his head, the boy muttered that his offers were probably the result of his father. He seemed a little bit more agitated and unsociable since the class had last seen him, and the atmosphere around him seemed more cold. The ponytail girl assumed that he was in a bad mood and just didn't question it, turning back to see Midnight crashing in to help. Just like that, the special session had begun. Bakugo was already scribbling a name as he passed the board over his shoulder, and Izuku followed suit. The class had been writing for a while, and when time was done, the provocative teacher wanted them to present what they had. There were weird ones like I Cannot Stop Twinkling and Alien Queen, which got rejected. Then there were some really blatant ones like Tail Man and Sugar Man. After a few rounds, Bakugo took to the stage. King Explosion Murderer. You probably shouldn't use something like that. Why not? Fuming at his seat, the blonde turns to see Izuku laughing his head off behind him. What's so funny, dumbass? Nothing. I couldn't believe you actually thought Miss Midnight would let you call yourself that. The greenette could barely breathe as his irritated friend grabbed his board. My name's fine. Unlike yours, you spelt it wrong. Seeing the neatly written gravitoid crossed out for planetoid, the greenette leaned over his desk to grab Bakugo's board and also rubbed it out. Here, Explosion Boy is perfect. Huh? The childish fight of the 2 teenage boys rubbing out the other's name continued until the teacher stopped them. You guys can fight during your break and lunch. Midoriya, how about you show the class your name? The greenette complied and jumped up to stand in front of his class. As I'm sure most of you can already guess, I've wanted my hero name to be Gravitoid for a while. I still think Planetoid sounds better. No one asked, Explosion Boy. What'd you say, Planetoid? It's officially Gravitoid now. The 2 immediately started bickering again, and Midnight just sighed before ushering the child to his seat. The 2 kept grumbling, but quietened down as others had their turn. There were no surprises in names apart from that moment when Izuku figured out who Ida's brother was. The engine boy had chosen to take the mantle of his brother. The greenette did notice, however, that Uraraka seems to have finished the second half of Ingenium's name, which Ida was hesitant to write down. Lord Explosion Murderer! No, that's still not okay. Why is he like this? The bell went off for lunch, and the class was walking down the corridor, chatting about whose internship they should accept. Izuku was muttering away as usual before he got smacked by the angry blonde. Blinking as he realized that he had been talking non-stop for the past half an hour, he laughed it off, and they proceeded to eat in peace. As the squad of friends just chattered happily amongst themselves, a conversation with a completely different tone occurred in their homeroom. I know what you're thinking, so stop it now. Uraraka, this is none of your business. It was Uraraka and Ida having an argument. They were in the empty classroom and standing around the Azurette's desk. None of my business? So you want me to just watch my friend make the same mistake I did? Ida, there is no way I'm letting you go! The 2 had grown closer with the time they had spent together, and were usually almost inseparable. The brunette was there when Tensei had asked the youngest Ida to inherit the hero name, which was why she had caught him before the engine boy backed out. It's your brother's final request as a hero, was what she said, and to the end the Azurite gave in. They had kept an eye out for each other ever since USJ. Now they were raising their voices against each other as Uraraka held her classmate's internship paper. Ida, why does it have Manuel the normal hero written here, when you told your mother that you would join the Ingenium Agency? It's nothing serious, Uraraka. I just thought it would be a good idea to travel the city I'm used to through someone else's perspective. Tenya, we both know that's not true! Uraraka glared up at the person before her. The boy knew she was serious as she had called him by his first name, and he looked toward the ground. You can't expect me not to yell at you for doing this! Do you seriously think I was going to let another one of my friends die? Tears were welling in her chocolate brown eyes, and her friend, despite shutting his heart down in the name of vengeance, just couldn't help but falter. I can see your eyes, you know. I did the exact same thing. If it wasn't for Midoriya, Bakugo, and Kirishima, I might be dead right now. The padded fingers ran through the cute bob, once again disheveling her hair as she started to curl in on herself at the memory. Even if she had moved on, the vivid image was something Uraraka could never forget. Chuchun is dead. There's nothing I can do except move forward. It almost cost my life to figure that out. I know that if I die, I would make others sad. Tensei isn't dead, you know? She started to hyperventilate, but managed to calm herself down. Her body had unwillingly crouched down into a hunched position as her teary eyes glanced at her closest friend. Oh, Chunk, Ida didn't know what to say. The brunette's words were heavy, filled to the brim with both kindness and pain. She had seen right through him, and deep down, he knew she wanted only what was best for him. The girl was just tearing up at the idea of him dying on her and mumbling about how he couldn't leave her like that. The tall student sighed before crouching down before her. Tenya, please. You can't do that to me. Pulling her into a warm embrace, the boy nodded his head. His glasses were becoming a little foggy as Ida felt the girl hug back. I won't, okay? I don't know what got over me. I'm sorry for scaring you like that. Thank you, Ochako. As much as the pained heart wished to hunt down the one responsible, Ida knew that acting recklessly would only worry Uraraka to no end. He had to be the bigger person and deal with the consequences of his brother's career-ending injury. He understood that now. After all, he would do the same if the roles were reversed. The engine boy had witnessed the brunette jump from the USJ stairs, all while in a fit of rage. He took a deep breath and let the idea of vengeance slowly ease from his mind. Violence was not the answer to his problem, never had been, and never would be. As they hugged, they both thanked their late friend for keeping them safe in her sacrifice. Even in death, Tsu would be a hero. I am here in a bizarre position! The group of friends paused as All Might appeared in front of them. Huh? Oh, right. Later, losers. Without hesitation, Bakugo took a step toward the number one hero, who made it obvious that he wanted to talk to the blonde. Izuku could understand the look as he just stood there, a gap starting to form between them. But before the two could leave, the blonde hair turns to face him. What are you standing around for, Planetoid? Hurry up! Huh? What's Gachan doing? Izuku blinked as he looked at his rival. Questions were flowing through his mind. Wasn't I supposed to leave? It was getting a little awkward, and the kid knew he had to act fast. If he didn't move then, Mina and the others would ask questions. I guess it makes sense if I go too. We can use the head of class as an excuse. Quickly smiling at the others, the freckled boy waved his classmates goodbye. Yeah, I was just thinking, be glad I didn't mutter your ears off. They left, and as they walked down the corridor, Izuku recognized the door as the room where All Might had taken them previously. Mirio was also there, but the youngest child already knew that he wouldn't be involved with the conversation. I actually wanted to talk to you about internships. Toshinori looked at the two letters in his hands before facing the third year in Bakugo. If the atmosphere was lighter, Izuku would have jokingly commented that the loud blondes were having a meeting, but he wasn't in the mood. As he predicted, the conversation had nothing to do with him, while the other two got offers from someone called Gran Torino. Mirio took the letter and pocketed it, explaining how he would stay with the Night Eye Agency. Bakugo was originally going to accept a different offer, but the new opportunity was too tempting to pass. They weren't the only ones having an interesting conversation. Just a few train rides away, a vigilante stood in the League of Villains base. So, you were the ones to attack UA. The man was the hero killer, also known as Stain. He had the reputation of ending the lives of heroes he deemed unworthy, and now the vigilante stood before two figures. One was covered in hands, as the other seemed to be an intangible mist. "And you want to add me to your numbers?" The man with light hair nodded. His blood-red eyes were heavy with some sort of goal, and it wasn't the look of a man-child, as the rumors had spoken of. "What are you after?" Under previous circumstances, the tantrum thrower would have simply replied that he wanted to kill off All Might, but it was a little different now. Shigaraki had spent the past few days watching the sports festival again and again until he got himself an answer. Knowing his goal was no longer simple, the leader knew that patience was needed. He also knew that he needed numbers, but not the same as before. What Shigaraki wanted was power, and Stain was someone potentially useful.
The better question would be how I'm going to get there. Join me, even if it's temporary. Join me for my plans in 4 months' time, and I'll show you the truth of this filthy world. See if they can smile through anything that happens. You can judge the answer with your own eyes.
Stain knew that that was an evasive answer. But considering that the person before him did have motivation, the vigilante was willing to listen. "If that's the case, then I'll hold a temporary truce." "All Might, sir, are you okay?" Mirio asked as the number one started to shake. The man nodded before turning to Bakugo. "He's my teacher, so I'm sure he will tell you what you need before I potentially pass one for all of you. As for you, Mirio, Night Eye is my former sidekick, so I'm sure he knows what he's doing." Who finished with what he needed them for. The whole time Izuku had just been thinking to himself when Bakugo nudged him. "Oi! We asked where you were planning to go." Izuku thought for a moment as Mirio held out his letter. "If you want, you can go in my place. You were so close in the sports festival anyway." Bakugo agreed, but the greenette shook his head. The letter was not addressed to him. "That just means I'm not good enough." The child smiled before opening his rucksack, showing them his intern application. "I'm going to the number 4 agency instead." He looked at the paper with determination. Izuku planned to ignore the nagging feeling in his mind before announcing proudly, "I'll be interning with the Fiber Hero. Best genist." Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.